Good evening, and welcome to Dream Theatre for a relaxed mind. Lay back, turn out the lights, and put on the kettle. Coffee, tea, or perhaps something even more ambitious. Tea and Gravity, a little corner of the universe where we let science take off its lab coat, put on its fluffiest dressing gown, and make itself a warm cup of something soothing. I'm Professor Teabottom, former astrophysicist, current tea enthusiast and biscuit philosopher. Before we tumble headlong into tonight's sleepy tale of science and softly simmering wonder, a small request from your ever-thirsty host. If you find yourself enjoying these curious bedtime ramblings, do please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Consider joining our free Substack. There you'll be notified the moment a new episode appears, and you'll gain entry to a rather cosy salon of discussion, where we share thoughts, swap ideas for future episodes, and occasionally argue politely about whether Gravity has a favourite biscuit. The link's tucked in the description like a note under a teacup. Now then, let's begin. With me tonight is Pig, orange and white, dreamer, and, as of late, the sole feline occupant after the legendary Pig 2 departed this world some years ago. A tale best saved for a rainy night. And, as always, the mysterious Jupiter and Jupiter, whose whereabouts are best described as subject to uncertainty. Some say I never played drums for Spinal Tap. Others say there was never a Pig 2. In both cases, evidence is conveniently missing, but I keep a battered metronome and an old collar on the shelf, just in case memory wins the argument. Now, before we set out, the matter of tea must be addressed. Tonight's selection is a peculiar one, a blend called Event Horizon. The packet arrived with no explanation save a cryptic note, for use when the night feels wider than usual. The leaves shimmer with gold flecks and smell faintly of thunderstorms and velvet. If the universe ever brewed a cup for itself, I imagine it would taste like this, mysterious, a little dangerous, and entirely impossible to resist. Pig watches as I pour. His ears flick at the hiss of the kettle, his tail thumping in quiet anticipation, or perhaps in warning. He is, after all, a connoisseur of both comfort and caution, never venturing too far from the fire unless absolutely necessary. I can't blame him. On nights like these, even the most steadfast professor feels a twinge of uncertainty. As the tea steeps, the room gathers itself around me. My study is a sanctuary of old wood, battered books, half-solved puzzles, and the gentle ticking of the clock. It's a room built for thinking, for remembering, for waiting out the storms of the world. Tonight, however, the air holds an electric expectation. It's as if the house is leaning in, listening. I settle into my chair, tea in hand, Pig beside me. Outside, the Sussex sky is improbably clear, stars littered across it like crumbs after a midnight snack. The world feels suspended, poised between what is and what might be. I raise my cup and inhale. The aroma is deep, almost dizzying, smoke and fruit and something sharper beneath, like cold metal or the distant hum of machinery. I sip, and the taste is as strange as promised. Rich and dark with a flicker of starlight somewhere in the aftertaste. Pig, unimpressed, returns to contemplating the night, and then, quite suddenly, I feel it. A faint tug. Not physical, but an insistent curiosity, as though the universe itself has leaned in a little too close and is gently pulling at the edge of my sleeve. The steam from the cup doesn't rise as it should, but begins to spiral, drawn downward into the depths of the mug. For a moment, the world shifts, just a fraction, but enough to set my heart skipping. Pig sits up, ears sharp. The spiral in my tea tightens, the air in the room growing dense and strange. Books rattle softly on their shelves. The old clock ticks louder, slower. I can almost hear a voice. Not words exactly, but the sense of an invitation. Not a summons, but a beckoning. like the first note of a familiar song drifting in from another room. I should say, no. It is late. The fire is warm, Pig is purring, and Jupiter have left me in charge. But the spiral deepens. The tug becomes a whisper at the edge of thought. Come and see. There are sensible reasons to ignore it. The world is full of perfectly reasonable adventures, new teas, unfinished crosswords, a favourite bit of Bach on the record player, and yet there is always that other possibility, the one that tugs gently, persistently, at the back of the mind. Pig nudges my hand. The spiral pulses once, twice, and the study tilts around me, not quite spinning, but realigning itself around this new gravitational curiosity. I take another sip, glance at Pig, and let the moment linger. The kettle clicks off, the stars blink above Sussex, and the universe waits, patient, inviting, entirely unconcerned with my plans for an early night. Some journeys begin with a bang, others with a whisper. Ours tonight begins with a question, a cup of strange tea, and the quiet certainty that something is about to change. There is, I suspect, a fine art to declining invitations from the universe. I have been perfecting it for years. There are times when one's door is battered by adventure, and the wise course is to double lock it, draw the curtains, and feign deafness while steeping a second pot. For all its glittering promise, the unknown can be every bit as inconvenient as an unexpected house guest, or worse, a dinner guest with an allergy to both gluten and conversation. Tonight, as the spiral in my teacup tightens and the air vibrates with silent possibility, I resolve, firmly, if not entirely convincingly, to stay put. I reach for my battered cardigan, the one Pig has appropriated as his personal sleeping mat, and sink a little deeper into my chair. The familiar is, after all, an underrated pleasure. Tea, a warm lap, a gently wheezing radiator, and Pig, who has just discovered a sunbeam clinging to the edge of the carpet and is now determined to pounce upon it, as if to demonstrate the power of will over physics. I'm not going anywhere, I declare, with the conviction of a man who very much hopes he will not be contradicted by cosmic forces. Not tonight. Pig glances up, eyes half-lidded, as if to say, "That's what you said the last time you tried to avoid adventure, and we all remember how that ended. Or at least I do." I sigh, gently stroking his head, and turn my attention back to the teacup. The spiral is fading, but the tug is not. It's an odd sensation, like the memory of an itch, or the echo of a name you once heard in a dream and have been trying to recall ever since. It's there, waiting, but I am determined to ignore it for a while longer. I set the cup down and look about my study for distractions. The room is littered with the artefacts of a life lived slightly askew from the ordinary. There's a half-finished crossword, a stack of scientific journals dating back to the mid-70s, the year not the temperature, and, for reasons best left unexamined, a solitary racing glove signed to T, with admiration, JC. I never did learn whether Jimmy Clark meant it for me, or for the cousin who once brought him tea at a Silverstone paddock. It matters little. Like all the best souvenirs, its value lies not in provenance, but in the story it allows me to tell myself. Outside, the last birds are quieting, and somewhere in the hedgerow a fox yips, briefly breaking the spell of stillness. The clock ticks on. Pig, having vanquished the sunbeam, returns to his post atop the windowsill, tail curling around his feet, a furry question mark punctuating the night. There are, as it turns out, many ways to resist the call of the unknown. Some people clean, some people garden. I am partial to making lists. Things to do tomorrow, things I ought to have done last week, things I should probably apologise for in the next letter to Alan Parsons. Alan, if you're listening, I still think B-flat is a perfectly respectable key for a Moog synthesizer, regardless of the day of the week. Tonight's list grows. Check the oil in the Amira, order more Assam, see if Jupiter and Jupiter have eaten the leftover chicken, and most importantly, avoid being drawn into any cosmic shenanigans. For good measure, I fish out an old notebook, one of those thick leather-bound affairs with more ambition than actual content, and jot down a few thoughts on the theory of gravitational reluctance, which is the technical term I have just invented for the process of finding reasons not to investigate strange phenomena in one's teacup. Pig, unimpressed by my efforts at scientific nomenclature, yawns widely and resumes his pursuit of a patch of moonlight now sneaking across the rug. For a moment, I envy him. Cats have an enviable resistance to adventure. Their universe is defined by comfort, territory, and the pursuit of snacks. They are, in a sense, masters of inertia. I've often wondered whether Newton was inspired to formulate his first law of motion by observing a particularly obstinate feline refuse to leave a sunbeam. I tell myself it is perfectly reasonable to stay in, to forgo the lure of the spiral and the whisper of possibility. After all, what could be more sensible than a night spent with familiar things? A cup of tea, a cat, a room arranged to one's liking, and the quiet, gentle certainty that tomorrow will come much as today did, provided one doesn't go wandering off into black holes or interstellar mysteries. But sensible, as Richard Feynman used to say, is rarely where the fun is found. I glance again at the teacup. The spiral has almost vanished, but in its place is a faint shimmer on the surface, like the last echo of a melody played in a distant room, or the memory of Pig 2's purr in the early morning quiet. I catch myself listening, waiting for some sign that the moment has passed. The room is still. The only sound is Pig's soft breathing, the tick of the clock, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of something waiting. At this point, most rational people would double down on their resistance. A stronger man, or at least a busier one, might throw himself into work or distraction. I, however, find my mind drifting, back to old stories, half-remembered adventures, and the way the world always seems just a little bit stranger than we're willing to admit. I think of Cousin George, whose claim to fame was chauffeuring Einstein to lectures in Princeton. George was not a man given to philosophical speculation, but he swore the best way to navigate both traffic and relativity was to trust your instincts and never, under any circumstances, let a physicist navigate. Perhaps there's wisdom in that. Perhaps not. I think, too, of those studio nights when no one quite remembers I was present. There's a peculiar freedom in being forgotten, or in knowing you were there, even if no one else does. The universe is full of such moments, present, persistent, waiting to be noticed, and yet perfectly content to slip away unnoticed if you refuse to acknowledge them. Pig returns to my lap, curling up with the satisfied air of one who has successfully navigated all of life's great challenges. He purrs, and I feel the vibration through my bones. It's a comforting sound, an anchor against the drift of possibility. I look at the teacup once more. The shimmer is gone. The room is quiet. For a moment I think the call has faded, that I have successfully resisted. I sip my tea, savouring the taste, and let the warmth fill me. It is enough for now to be here, to have chosen comfort over curiosity, routine over risk. But even as I congratulate myself, I know it cannot last. The universe, like a persistent solicitor, rarely takes no for an answer. The spiral will return, the call will come again, and sooner or later I will find myself unable to resist. For now, though, I have Pig, a chair, and a cup of Event Horizon, and that is adventure enough for one night. Or so I tell myself as the clock strikes midnight and somewhere in the darkness the wind shifts, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of something wonderful, and wholly unplanned, waiting just beyond the edges of what I know. Part 3, The Threshold Beckons. It's astonishing how the universe has a way of making itself at home in the most ordinary of places. One moment, You're ensconced in your favourite chair, with nothing more on your mind than whether the kettle will need descaling before the weekend, and the next you're confronted by the unmistakable sensation that reality is quietly rearranging the furniture behind your back. The spiral in my teacup had faded, but now the very air in the study seems to thrum with possibility. The shadows thrown by the lamplight stretch a little longer, curl a little further, as if eager to explore the darker corners of my bookshelves. Pig sits upright at the windowsill, fur on end, as if he's caught the scent of something more extraordinary than fox or fresh scone. I look up from my notes, and for a heartbeat, everything holds still. The ticking of the clock slows, first to a ponderous thud, then to silence. Even the familiar groan of the radiator ceases, as if the house itself is waiting, holding its breath. And then, in the centre of the rug, precisely where Pig has dragged his favourite cushion, into a tangled heap, a new shadow appears, not cast by lamp or moon, but by something else, something neither wholly dark nor entirely light. It's as if a patch of the world has decided to fold in on itself, leaving behind a gentle, swirling void that pulses in time with my own heartbeat. Pig, never one to shirk from the spectacular, hops down and pads closer. He halts just shy of the shadow, eyes wide, tail low, whiskers vibrating in anticipation or alarm. For a moment, we both simply stare, listening to the silence that is now thick as winter fog. I rise, reluctantly, for my chair and I have shared many comfortable hours, and cross to stand beside Pig. Up close, the shadow has depth, impossible depth. It's not absence, not quite, but the promise of elsewhere. The pattern at its centre echoes the spiral that had haunted my teacup. The universe, it seems, is nothing if not persistent. I'm reminded, absurdly, of an old Lotus advertisement I clipped from a magazine as a boy, an image of Jimmy Clark poised on the starting line, the caption reading, "The threshold is where the story begins." Of course, Clark was talking about racetracks and the thin margin between control and calamity, but the sentiment applies just as well to cosmic adventure. One step forward, and nothing is ever quite the same. For a moment I consider ignoring the phenomenon entirely, retreating to the safety of routine and a second helping of digestive biscuits. But Pig, to my surprise, nudges my ankle, urging me closer. His confidence is contagious, or perhaps it's just that feline curiosity is more stubborn than my caution. With an unsteady breath I reach out. The air near the shadow tingles, static on the skin, the scent of ozone and old paper. The boundary is as soft as silk, as insistent as memory. It's the sort of sensation one might experience upon opening a long-forgotten letter from a friend. Recognition and anticipation twined together. A gentle pull toward something just out of reach. I pause, my hand hovering. Across the study the clock ticks again, faintly. Somewhere upstairs one of the Jupiters knocks something heavy to the floor. Evidence, perhaps, that even absent cats are affected by cosmic events. Are we really doing this? I murmur, half to Pig, half to the universe. Pig blinks, then sits down, curling his tail around his feet in a gesture of dignified encouragement. He has decided, it seems, that if there is an adventure to be had, he will not be left behind. There's a peculiar comfort in that. Whatever unknown threshold I am about to cross, at least I will do so with company. There's a lesson in it, something about bravery being less about boldness, and more about having someone to share the next step, even if that someone is orange, white, and prone to knocking over teacups at crucial moments. I take a deep breath and step forward, letting my fingers graze the swirling edge of the void. The sensation is immediate, tingling, exhilarating, not unpleasant, as if every atom in my body is suddenly aware of its own story. For a split second, I glimpse something beyond. Not a place exactly, but the possibility of otherness, the universe's invitation scrawled in the language of gravity and light. The study shifts, the bookshelves ripple at the edges, the lamplight bends. I feel the floor drop away and expand in the same breath. Pig presses against my leg, a solid, living anchor. At the edge of this new shadow, poised between the comforts of the known and the seduction of the unknown, I hesitate one final time. The spiral pulses, inviting, inexorable. There is, I suppose, a certain symmetry to it all. The threshold is both exit and entrance, an ending and a beginning. Behind me, the safe world of tea and tartan cushions. Before me, the untold country of black holes, wonder, and whatever stories the night has yet to tell. With a final look at Pig, whose eyes shine with the reflection of infinite possibility, I gather what remains of my courage, recall Jimmy Clark's easy calm on the starting line, and step forward, out of the light, into the waiting spiral. Crossing the event horizon. If you've never crossed the threshold of your own study and found yourself tumbling into the yawning embrace of a cosmic anomaly, I can't say I recommend it for everyone. Still, for those who prefer their science up close and aren't too attached to the idea of linear time, it's an experience to savour, much like the first sip of tea after a long walk in the rain. Bracing, mysterious, and not at all what you expected. There is no sensation of movement at first. One moment I'm standing on my familiar well-scuffed rug, Pig pressed comfortingly against my shin, and the next, the floor has vanished beneath us, replaced by a curious feeling of weightlessness. Not the up and down kind of weightlessness, but the everywhere at once variety, as though gravity has abruptly forgotten its lines and is improvising. Pig, ever practical in the face of cosmic upheaval, sinks his claws into the cuff of my trousers with a quiet determination that suggests he'll be coming along whether the universe likes it or not. It is strangely comforting, his orange and white bulk a small stubborn anchor in the roiling chaos. The familiar boundaries of the study dissolve, bookshelves ripple and stretch into impossible curves, the lamplight warps into elongated spirals, and the once cosy walls seem to unfold, receding endlessly into a velvet dark distance. There's a peculiar sensation of being both inside and outside at once, a liminal state, like listening to a favourite song played backwards, all the notes familiar yet uncannily rearranged. I try to recall the scientific literature on event horizons, a term that, in my experience, is usually discussed from a safe distance, preferably with a biscuit in hand. The event horizon, as defined by the more poetic branches of astrophysics, is the point of no return. Cross it, and you are inexorably drawn inward, forever parted from the rest of the universe, with only the boldest equations for company. It is, I realise, exactly the kind of predicament Richard Feynman would have found amusing. Richard once told me, over tea and a badly tuned ukulele, that the only real difference between genius and madness was whether you made it home for supper. I think of this now as Pig and I drift, caught on the edge of everything, with the study receding behind us like a fading memory. A strange calm settles in. The chaos that threatened to engulf us a moment ago becomes a slow, graceful dance. Lights flicker around us, familiar at first, then fractal and multiplied. I catch glimpses of things that feel like memories, or dreams, or both. There's Bowie, adjusting a control panel with a wink and a raised eyebrow. A flash of Alan Parsons humming to himself, patching a cable into a machine made of gears and stars. Jimmy Clark glides by, helmet tucked under one arm, offering a wordless nod that somehow fills me with courage. Pig's tail lashes once, twice, then he relaxes, purring, a low, resonant sound that seems to reverberate not just in the air, but in the fabric of whatever strange place we now inhabit. The rules here are different. but not unfamiliar. Time stretches, folds, loops. I see myself standing by the window with Pig as a kitten. Pig too sleeping by the hearth in winter. Jupiter and Jupiter racing down a corridor that doubles back on itself, never quite arriving but never losing heart. The universe, it seems, is less a line than a patchwork quilt. Memory stitched into moments, stitched again into infinity. I'm not afraid exactly. There is a sense of surrender, yes, but also a deep curiosity, an urge to see what lies beyond. I remind myself as the world spins sideways that an event horizon is not a wall, but a boundary, not an ending, but a beginning. This is what every tea ritual, every late-night theory, every chance encounter has prepared me for. The leap into the unknown. Pig lifts his head, and in a gesture that is both regal and completely ordinary, surveys the shifting void. There is a dignity in his posture, a reminder that, whatever happens, we are still ourselves. Even in the heart of mystery, a cat is a cat, and a professor is, above all else, a seeker of questions. Around us, colours bloom and fade, shapes form, a teacup, a racing helmet, the spiral of a galaxy, the outline of an old, beloved chair. They flicker at the edge of vision, never quite solid, never quite gone. It is in its own peculiar way rather like dreaming, only this time I am fully awake. I catch myself laughing, a quiet, startled sound. Pig blinks at me, as if to ask what I find so amusing. Oh, nothing, I say, and it's almost true. Nothing, and everything. As we drift further, a gentle pull tugs us onward, not harsh, but inexorable. I think of Cousin George, the only man I know to have gotten lost on a one-way street while chauffeuring Einstein, and how he always said the trick was not to fight the flow, but to lean into it and see where it takes you. I suspect he'd have approved of our current predicament, or at least found it easier to navigate than downtown Princeton at rush hour. The darkness deepens, but it's not empty. There are currents here, eddies of light and meaning, reminders that even in the unknown there is structure, there is story, there is the comfort of old friends and the promise of discovery. Pig curls tighter against me, his purr a soft song in the dark. I close my eyes, not to escape, but to listen, to the rhythm of the cosmos, the echo of memory, the promise of what comes next. Beyond the event horizon, the journey has only just begun. It is said, usually by people who have never been there, that the inside of a black hole is a place of terror and confusion, all chaos and doom. I can now report with the peculiar certainty that comes only from direct experience, that while confusion is certainly part of the package, terror is largely optional. In fact, if you bring your own tea, a trusted cat, and a healthy disrespect for conventional wisdom, it's not entirely unpleasant at all. For a moment it is neither dark nor light, but something in between, a space suffused with colourless illumination, if such a thing can be imagined. The concept of up and down seems to have left the room, perhaps hand in hand with before and after. Pig, ever adaptable, is now floating in a loose, dignified spiral, paws tucked in, looking for all the world like an otter adrift in a gentle current. I, meanwhile, appear to have misplaced my sense of gravity. My arms and legs float, slow and dreamlike, as if I am swimming through the memory of water. The laws here are different, but not arbitrary. They are, I sense, merely the sort of rules one would invent if given an infinite blank slate, and a fondness for the peculiar. Time, for example, has become untethered. My thoughts move in lazy loops. I remember next week as clearly as I remember last Thursday. There is a moment where I am both pouring tea and sipping it, Pig simultaneously dozing and prowling, Jupiter and Jupiter weaving in and out of my peripheral vision, ghosts of absent companions, now slightly more present than usual. Every now and then the scene shifts in a way that suggests not movement, but reinterpretation. My study reassembles itself, not as a room but as a series of impressions: a battered chair, a half-drunk mug, the scent of dusty books and lemon biscuits. These fragments drift past me in slow motion. When I reach for them, they dissolve into equations, spinning and sparkling, chalk on a blackboard that has itself become unmoored. Pig's purr, I notice, has changed timbre. It resonates, not just in the air, but in the bones of whatever passes for space here. The sound weaves through the shifting landscape, coaxing shapes and colours from the void. I'm suddenly convinced that all creation is shaped, in some small way, by the contented purring of a good cat. I experiment as scientists do with small motions. I reach for my floating mug. Instead of closing the distance, my arm seems to elongate, looping around itself in a Möbius strip of intent. The mug arrives obediently in my hand, though whether by action, memory, or some negotiation between the two, I cannot say. I sip, because what else does one do when faced with impossible physics, and the tea is simultaneously hot, cold, sweet, and smoky, like drinking the memory of every cup I have ever had, and every cup I will have, all at once. There is a freedom here, a lightness that belies the black hole's reputation for heaviness. I realise with a laugh that while the singularity may have all the seriousness of a mathematics exam, the journey in is as playful as a childhood daydream. My laughter unspools into ripples that echo back to me as musical notes, snatches of Bowie and the plink of a badly tuned Spinal Tap drum kit. I could swear, just for a moment, I hear the faint clatter of my old metronome and the ghost of Pig 2's answering meow. Pig, unfazed by the breakdown of conventional reality, chases a floating speck of dust that has decided, for reasons of its own, to orbit his nose at a respectful distance. He launches himself after it, and with a twist of space he vanishes, only to reappear behind me upside down, his tail sweeping in graceful arcs through a landscape that has briefly decided to become a page from a colouring book. I find myself missing the usual rules, but not much. Here, everything feels possible, and nothing feels final. I wonder aloud what Feynman would make of it all. Richard always insisted that the best science was play. He'd likely have set up a game of quantum billiards by now, betting me £1 that he could knock the 8-ball into a black hole and still have time to make a sandwich before the information was lost. I try to remember the equations that describe this place, the Einstein field equations, the metrics, the diagrams scrawled on the backs of envelopes during long nights in the Abbey Road lounge. The symbols drift through my mind in glowing, unhurried procession. I see the famous diagrams, light cones bending, world lines looping back on themselves, time and space stretched and folded into origami swans. I realise that in here, such things are less metaphor and more simple fact. Pig, for his part, seems unconcerned with tensor calculus, having decided that the laws of physics are best enjoyed from the vantage point of a sunbeam, real or imagined. It is only after several minutes, or hours, or centuries, who's to say, that I notice something on the horizon, if one can have a horizon inside a place that is all centre and no edge. There is a gathering of shapes, of presences. Some seem familiar. Shadowy figures with a hint of spectacles, wild hair, or the unmistakable silhouette of a racing helmet. I think, for a moment, I glimpse Cousin George, his cap askew, tipping an imaginary hat. And is that Alan Parsons fiddling with the dials of a cosmic synthesizer? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's just the mind's way of making sense of the infinite. Pig and I drift closer, the current gentle but insistent. I feel no fear, only a widening sense of possibility. Here, in the heart of strange physics, everything is both mystery and invitation. I gather Pig in my arms, grateful for his solid warmth and his eternal readiness for a nap, and I let the realm of impossible rules, dreamlike images and playful realities enfold us. For the first time since crossing the threshold, I am not wondering how to get home. I am simply here, inside the heart of a black hole, and the universe, bless it, has decided to play. It's a strange thing, finding comfort in a place where logic takes a holiday, and the laws of physics have left a note on the door saying back in 5 minutes. Yet, as Pig and I drift through the shifting dreamscape of the black hole's heart, I am struck not by loneliness, but by an odd sense of company, a sense that, even in the most unfathomable dark, one is rarely truly alone. The landscape here is always changing. Sometimes it feels like the inside of a kaleidoscope spun by a quantum mechanic who's read a few too many science fiction novels. Sometimes it's an endless field of stars, each one flickering with the memory of something half remembered. Other times it's simply the echo of a song, familiar chords ringing out, somehow louder in the hush. It's in one of those hushes, with Pig softly purring as he orbits me like a slightly judgmental moon, that I hear it. The opening riff of Supersonic drifting through the void as crisply as if I'd put my battered Oasis cassette on the hi-fi back home. For a moment I wonder if I've simply conjured it out of nostalgia. A trick of the mind, the way a lonely traveller might imagine footsteps behind them on a misty road. But no, the chords hang in the air, defiant and bright, scattering the darkness as if the void itself has decided to host a Mancunian karaoke night. Pig's ears swivel. He gives me a look that could mean either turn it up or not again, Teabottom, but before I can reply, the darkness stirs. Figures begin to emerge from the fabric of the place, not sharply drawn but recognisable in the way dreams are recognisable, a collage of memories, stories, and the stubborn refusal to forget old friends. First comes Richard Feynman, balancing a pair of bongo drums and grinning like he's just told the punchline to a joke only he understands. Nice acoustics, he says, rapping out a rhythm that seems to bounce off the spiral arms of distant galaxies. You always said the universe was a stage, Teabottom. Welcome to the main act. Behind him, a familiar outline in a helmet leans against a phantom lotus. Jimmy Clark. He nods, silent and steady, as if to remind me that skill and nerve are often just two sides of the same cosmic coin. He gestures, and the black hole's swirling winds part for a moment, revealing a distant view of home, a narrow, rain-soaked Sussex lane, and a flash of green paintwork vanishing into a corner. More shapes appear. Alan Parsons, calmly fine-tuning a mixing desk made of nebulae, adjusting the levels so the swirl of Oasis can be heard above the cosmic background hum. Alan winks at me, mouthing something about the importance of finding just the right balance between chaos and melody. Next to him, Bowie himself, ageless and enigmatic, floats by with a gentle salute, a feathered boa trailing stardust in his wake. Pig, who has now adopted the floating posture of an admiral surveying his fleet, seems entirely at home among this unlikely gathering. He drifts toward the shade of Pig 2, who appears only briefly, a memory within a memory, tail flicking as if to say, "Don't worry, old friend, I'm always close, especially when you can't see me." It's hard not to feel a little overawed by the company. The greatest minds I've known, the dearest friends and the odd musical idol, all assembled in the heart of the unknowable. But then, isn't that just the way of journeys? The places you expect to feel alone are often where you find the best company, sometimes from those you've loved, sometimes from those you've idolised, and sometimes, most mysteriously, from the parts of yourself you thought you'd left behind. The conversation here doesn't happen in words exactly. It happens in harmonies, in sidelong glances, in the confident hum of Pig's purr, and the crackling feedback of an electric guitar that refuses to behave. I find myself humming along to Supersonic, the words coming easily, though my voice drifts out in slow-motion echoes. You need to be yourself. You can't be no one else. In the shifting dark, Feynman taps a new rhythm. Alan overlays a harmony, and even Bowie seems to catch the beat, humming along with a cosmic smirk. Jimmy Clark simply watches, steady as gravity, reminding me that sometimes the best way to move forward is to trust the line and commit to the corner. Pig, emboldened by the company, does a somersault through a loop of light, landing with remarkable dignity for a cat in freefall. I can't help but laugh, the sound rippling out and joining the peculiar symphony. There is comfort in this odd assembly, comfort and something more. In a place where nothing is fixed and every rule is rewritten, friendship remains as real as gravity, as enduring as memory. The darkness isn't empty. It's filled with all the stories you've carried, all the songs you've sung, and all the companions, seen and unseen, who've shaped your journey. I gather Pig, who tolerates it with a rumbling purr, and let the music and laughter carry us deeper into the spiral. For all the unknowns ahead, I am not afraid. With friends beside me, even the strangest physics feels like home. If there is an entrance exam for wandering into the heart of a black hole, it is written in the dialect of Einstein, equal parts, paradox, poetry, and a hint of mischief. One soon discovers that the curriculum is compulsory and the tutors largely absent. Instead, you're left to muddle through as best you can, armed with a bit of common sense, an indifferent cat, and whatever scraps of dignity you manage to smuggle past the event horizon. For a moment, all is calm. The sort of calm that makes one suspicious, as if the universe is bracing for a particularly elaborate punchline. I drift beside Pig, our mutual orientation to the rest of existence anyone's guess. The landscape, or perhaps landscape is too bold a word, undulates gently. Horizons fold in on themselves like a badly organised conference agenda, and time is less an arrow and more a plate of slightly undercooked spaghetti. I attempt to orient myself. Left and right are suggestions. Up and down have taken separate holidays, and forward appears to be written in invisible ink. Pig, meanwhile, is busy unravelling the mysteries of quantum entanglement by chasing his own tail, which seems to appear in two places at once. There's a metaphor there, but I'll leave it to the philosophers, who are, I suspect, in the next spiral over, arguing about the bar tab. I reach out to steady myself and find, with a sort of grim amusement, that my hand lags behind by about half a thought. My body apparently has become a polite suggestion, occasionally honoured by the surrounding physics but more often ignored. This, I realise, is relativity in action. Everything is relative, including my sense of self, my teacup, and the status of my shoelaces, which now tie themselves, untie, and then decide to evolve into Mobius bands. Not bad for a Wednesday, I mutter, quoting my own journal from a particularly memorable day at Abbey Road, when time signatures and actual time seem to part ways. The universe, as ever, remains unmoved by my attempts at narrative control. The next trial appears almost out of nowhere: spaghettification. This is the delightfully undignified term physicists use to describe the fate of any object, be it astronaut, professor, or particularly sturdy armchair, crossing the gravitational gradient of a black hole. It is, in essence, being stretched lengthwise and squashed sideways until one becomes a sort of cosmic tagliatelle. I'd complain, but, to be fair, I've always wanted to be longer and thinner, just not perhaps by these particular means. I glance at Pig, half expecting alarm, but he is, as always, unbothered. His body a lazy ripple, his purr modulating through several octaves as his atoms reconsider their contractual obligations. If cats have a secret for surviving cosmic indignity, It's their absolute refusal to treat any of it as remarkable. I file this away for later, next to never accept a bet from Feynman and always read the label on experimental tea blends. Meanwhile, the rules of time dilation begin to assert themselves. As we spiral further in, clocks slow, memories overlap, and future and past become equally plausible as next Tuesday's weather forecast. For a moment I find myself at a cricket match in 1974, then blinking through the smoky haze of a Soho jazz club, then back in the study, Pig 2 on my lap and the rain hissing against the window. All of this happens while, paradoxically, I remain fully present, clinging to a floating teacup that resolutely refuses to spill, a small victory even here. The absurdity is frankly a comfort. It is a relief to know that the universe's great machinery, when glimpsed up close, is every bit as disorganised as the average British pub on quiz night. Astrophysicists will tell you otherwise, of course. But then, astrophysicists are paid to appear calm while everything collapses around them. If the universe wanted tidiness, it would have stuck to classical mechanics and left quantum theory in the suggestion box. Pig blinks at me, his eyes reflecting 1,000 possible outcomes, all of them equally unbothered. He flicks his tail, possibly both tails, and resumes his orbit, his confidence a steadying force in the shifting tides of space-time. In the midst of this chaos, I'm reminded of something Christopher Hitchens once said during a debate on, of all things, the meaning of the universe. It's not so much what happens to you, but how you notice it. Here, where noticing is the only reliable act left to me, I make a note to observe as carefully as possible, even as my left sock decides to embark on an exploratory mission to the next quantum neighbourhood. Somewhere, faint but insistent, the chords of supersonic thread through the turbulence. Oasis, it seems, is immune to relativity. A comforting thought, or at least a catchy one. I hum along, a small act of rebellion against the collapse of all things tidy and predictable. Eventually the trials settle into something like a rhythm. The study appears, flickers, and vanishes. Pig and I spin through a series of possible worlds, one where gravity is blue, another where tea steeps backwards in time, a third where Jupiter and Jupiter finally reveal themselves and promptly disappear again, as is their custom. There's a certain liberation in surrendering to the unpredictable. At the heart of relativity, after all, is the notion that perspective is everything. My perspective, such as it is that of a professor mildly inconvenienced by the universe's insistence on drama, and a cat who considers all things, space, time, cosmic spaghetti, fair game for a nap. With a final concerted effort, I gather Pig and the fragments of my composure. The turbulence subsides, and I find us drifting towards something new. A hush, a pause, the promise of another lesson lurking in the shadows. I straighten my collar, which has just become a Klein bottle, pat Pig, who purrs in 3 dimensions, and ready myself for whatever impossible ordeal lies ahead. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the universe always has another paradox waiting, like a pub landlord with one last riddle at closing time. After all, if you can't find your footing in relativity, you might as well enjoy the ride, and try not to lose your teacup in the process. It is one thing to have your mind expanded by a black hole, quite another to be offered the universe's answers on a silver platter, like some cosmic waiter with delusions of grandeur. For all the strangeness I have experienced, being untethered from time, gently spun into quantum tagliatelle, serenaded by oasis riffs floating through the void, nothing quite prepared me for the dazzling onslaught of infinite knowledge. Let me set the scene. Pig and I, having survived relativity's funhouse, now find ourselves in what might generously be called a gallery, or perhaps a library, except that the shelves and pictures and all the rest refuse to stay in one dimension. The space around us ripples, filled with doors and windows and open books, each one gleaming with the sort of promise that keeps scientists awake at night and, paradoxically, makes cats drowsy. Pig, unfazed by the prospect of total enlightenment, circles a cushion that materializes beneath him and promptly falls asleep, purring in perfect time with the flicker of cosmic secrets overhead. For my part, I remain standing, if standing is the right term for a state where up, down and left are all matters of polite suggestion, squinting at the nearest book as it tries to alphabetize itself in 3 languages simultaneously. A voice, or perhaps a feeling, gently tugs at my attention. "Go on, Professor," it whispers. "Ask anything. The answers are yours for the taking." It is the most seductive invitation since the first tea merchant offered me a sampler pack with my name handwritten on the label. There is a shimmering surface to everything, a sense that with one simple question, I might know, truly know, whatever it is that I've ever wondered. What is the nature of consciousness? How did life first arise from lifeless matter? What happened to my favourite fountain pen that vanished in 1987? And for that matter, who did write the real Wonder Wall? Here, every answer hovers just out of reach, sparkling with the dangerous clarity of a freshly washed window. I recall an afternoon in the Abbey Road lounge listening to Alan Parsons bemoan the state of music journalism, when Bowie, never one to shy from the profound, leaned over and said, "Careful what you wish for, old boy. It's not the answers that'll get you, but the questions you didn't think to ask." He was right, of course. Knowledge is an intoxicant, and the temptation to gulp it down is almost overwhelming. But the gallery is relentless. I am shown glimpses, proofs and equations, charts that solve unsolved mysteries, musical scores that reveal the structure of reality, and recipes that guarantee the perfect scone every time. In one shining instant, the secret to the unified field theory hangs before me, an answer so elegant I can almost taste it on my tongue. I'm not proud to admit it, but I am sorely tempted. The lure of the absolute answer, the urge to understand everything, it's the scientist's original sin. I imagine, for just a moment, being able to return to Sussex, to the battered study and the ever-sceptical pig, carrying not just stories but certainty. Imagine never fumbling for a solution, never being stumped by the universe's slyest riddles. But as the possibilities multiply, so do the dangers. There's a reason, I suspect, that black holes are not considered the most sociable of cosmic objects. Too much knowledge, all at once, is less like an illuminating sunrise and more like staring into a searchlight at point-blank range. I think of Richard Feynman, dear Richard, whose greatest pleasure was in not knowing, in the joy of the puzzle unsolved. "I'd rather have questions I can't answer," he once told me, "over a pint and a packet of crisps, than answers I can't question." Here, at the heart of everything, I finally understand what he meant. The gallery's offerings shift. I see absurdly a set of answers to old family myths. Did Cousin George truly teach Einstein to drive in reverse? Was there really a pig too, or have I invented him out of nostalgia and misplaced collars? Did I, or did I not, once play uncredited drums for Spinal Tap? Each answer, when glimpsed, flickers, satisfying in its neatness, but somehow less real than the uncertainty that gave birth to it. Pig, now snoring softly, rolls onto his back and exposes his belly, which glows faintly in the cosmic twilight. He is, I realise, entirely content to live without knowing whether Jupiter and Jupiter will ever emerge from their hiding place, or whether any cat truly knows its own mind. Perhaps this is the wisdom of felines, to accept the mystery, to savour the uncertainty. With a Hitchensian sigh, I step back. "No, thank you," I say to the swirling abundance. "Keep your answers. I'm rather fond of my questions, and I've no wish to spoil the ending." If the universe is surprised, it hides it well. The gallery shimmers, offering one last flicker of temptation, a flash of my name beside the grandest theorem, a half-heard refrain of supersonic drifting from behind a curtain, Pig 2 purring in a sunbeam that belongs to no world I know. The light dims, the doors fold away. The gallery, for all its infinite knowledge, gently recedes. I find myself, still with Pig, still unburdened by omniscience, drifting onward through the black hole's interior, filled not with disappointment but with relief. After all, there is joy in not knowing. There is poetry in the question, music in the gap, hope in the mystery. Pig stretches, yawns, and looks at me with the unblinking wisdom of a creature who has always known that the point of chasing the red dot is never to catch it, but to enjoy the chase. The universe, I suspect, agrees, and so we drift on, curious, imperfect, content, leaving infinite knowledge to those who want it, and infinite curiosity to those who know better. It is a curious thing to stand, if indeed stand is the right word, on the threshold of absolute unknowability. The singularity at the heart of the black hole is not a place, but the undoing of place, not a moment, but the collapse of every tick of every clock into a single, resonant now. It is the universe's way of shrugging and saying, well, I suppose that's that. Pig and I drift closer, the landscape, such as it is, distorting in ways that would give even the most dedicated surrealist painter second thoughts. My surroundings shift and pulse, at turns dazzling and almost tender. Swirling rivers of colour flow toward a vanishing point, only to reappear as cascades of musical notes or flickering shadows that hint at every home I've ever loved. The closer we come, the more everything seems to distill to essentials: memory, presence, the small weight of Pig pressed reassuringly against my chest. There's no wind, no chill, no sense of physical sensation at all. My mind is both empty and overflowing, a paradox that feels oddly appropriate for the end of everything and the start of something entirely new. If the rest of our journey through the black hole has been like a peculiar science experiment, sometimes baffling, sometimes exhilarating, this is a meditation. The universe sitting quietly at the far end of the bench, waiting to see what I will do next. I peer into the abyss. It does not peer back, at least not in any way I can comprehend. Instead, it radiates a deep, silent welcome. The singularity's pull is no longer a force but a feeling, a longing perhaps for connection or understanding. It is, I realise, less an ending than a promise that every story eventually finds its heart. Pig, far from alarmed, seems fascinated. He floats at my side, eyes wide and whiskers trembling, as if he can sense the gravitational melody at the heart of all things. I wonder, idly, if this is why cats are so determinedly mysterious. Perhaps every cat in some tiny corner of its being remembers what it's like to stand at the edge of the infinite and not blink. There's a flicker in my peripheral vision, a hint of Alan Parsons tuning a celestial mixing board, Feynman bouncing a photon between his hands, even Bowie, momentarily visible, sketching constellations in the dark with the sweep of a feathered sleeve. Each apparition seems to whisper, "Go on. It's only the universe after all, and you've come this far." The singularity itself remains just out of sight, not so much hidden as impossible. It is the ultimate vanishing act, a place where mass and energy, space and time, all coalesce into a mathematical point so dense and so brief that meaning itself is a negotiable commodity. I'm reminded absurdly of a scene from Miami Connection. Our heroes, having made it through chaos and calamity, stand together at the precipice of the final showdown. Everything has led them to this point, not because it was inevitable, but because the story at last demanded it. There is comfort in the absurd, a kinship in facing the unknown, with a raised eyebrow and the company of unlikely friends. Here at the edge, Even my thoughts seem to slow, as if the universe is rationing out its last remaining metaphors. I think of Pig 2, gone but not forgotten, of Cousin George, who never found Princeton on a map but knew every shortcut to wonder, of every cup of tea that ever soothed a cold night, every record spun as the rain pattered against the glass. Pig butts his head against my chin, a gentle insistence that anchors me in this moment. His eyes are clear, untroubled, as if to say, whatever comes next, we go together. I smile, the gesture simple and enormous. All right, old friend, I whisper, voice lost to the velvet hush. Let's see what's on the other side. The singularity looms, not a threat, but an invitation. I let go of the last threads of resistance, trusting in curiosity and company, in the lessons of every improbable journey I've ever taken. Pig purrs, a sound that vibrates through the very fabric of whatever's left of reality. The world contracts, then expands, then vanishes entirely, replaced by a singular, infinite brightness. And in that instant, as we cross the threshold into whatever comes after, I feel not fear, but a sudden overwhelming gratitude for the tea, the tunes, the questions, the cats, and the endless, beautiful uncertainty of it all. There are moments, rare as honest weather forecasts, when the universe lets its guard down. The laws fall silent, the swirling chaos recedes, and something as delicate as understanding floats gently into view. If you're fortunate or simply stubborn enough not to let go, you might find yourself at the centre of it all, not with a bang, but with a hush, a cat, and a cup of tea that somehow refuses to spill. That's where I now find myself, the very heart of the black hole. Pig pressed warmly against my ribs, his purr the last vibration in a world where everything else has been stripped away. There is no light, no dark, no up, no down, no sound but the echo of memory, the distant jangle of an oasis riff, and, for a reason I cannot explain, the faint scent of petrol and cheap plastic upholstery, surely a remnant from the Geo Metro I won on Wheel of Fortune decades ago. I close my eyes, not to shut the void out, but to see it better. In the dark, the boundaries fall away. I remember things with an impossible clarity. The first time Pig, and briefly Pig 2, curled up on my manuscript as if to protect it from reviewers. Jupiter and Jupiter emerging from under the sofa for precisely 3 minutes on Christmas Eve. Richard Feynman showing up at my door with a quantum puzzle and a bottle of dubious gin. The gentle clunk of the Metro's glove compartment, eternally stuffed with maps and stubborn optimism. At the singularity, time folds in on itself. I am every age at once, from a boy in a muddy schoolyard trying to launch a paper rocket into the rain, to a slightly weathered professor standing in the world's smallest car dealership, holding keys that would never quite fit my hand or my ego. I am driving the Metro across England in the long, hopeful dawn of the 1990s. Pig a kitten in the passenger seat, the engine bravely emitting a sound somewhere between encouragement and protest. It's said that in the presence of infinity, the trivial and the profound are made equal. Here, that is evidently true. The great loves and petty victories, the elegant equations and the botched cuppers, they're all stitched together, a patchwork universe whose meaning lies not in its grandeur but in its ordinariness. I see every tea spilled, every biscuit snatched by Pig, every joke about my Wheel of Fortune triumph, echoing forever in the infinite hush. For a moment, I wonder if this is the grand revelation, not the secret of gravity or the unification of physics, but something gentler, truer, that the fabric of the universe is held together by the things we laugh about years later, by the stories we can't help but retell at dinner, by the humility that comes from winning, not a laurel wreath or a sports car, but a Geo Metro and a lifetime of gentle bemusement. Pig nudges my chin, his eyes wide and untroubled. His fur glows softly with borrowed starlight, or perhaps with the accumulated warmth of every fireside we've ever shared. He has always known that the world's mysteries are best approached sideways, a bit of skepticism, a lot of curiosity, and a willingness to nap when things become too complicated. A voice stirs at the edge of perception, perhaps my own, or one of the companions who have drifted in and out of this voyage. Feynman, Hitchens, Bowie, Clark, Parsons, Allen, Jupiter, and Jupiter. They do not offer answers. They offer laughter, sideways glances, the brief comfort of knowing that even the best minds have been hopelessly lost at least once, ideally in a car park. And suddenly, it all feels perfectly clear. The singularity is not a place of annihilation, but of gathering in. Everything comes together. The metro and the McLaren, the lowliest mistake and the loftiest insight, the burnt toast and the Nobel-worthy experiment. Every question is welcomed, every answer provisional, every oddity forgiven. Here, I understand, the universe is not a stern examiner, but a patient old friend, offering you another biscuit even though you've already had 3. It does not ask you to solve it, only to notice it, to share it, to let it unravel in your company. It is, for all its terror and awe, as cosy as the cushion in Pig's favourite sunbeam, as intimate as a mug shared with a companion who's known you too long to bother pretending. Pig curls up, purrs, and, for the first time on this journey, closes his eyes. His faith is contagious. I feel myself relax, not into oblivion, but into the deepest comfort. The knowledge that nothing is lost, not really, that the story, however winding, is always worth the retelling, that the revelation is not in the answer, but in the question, repeated and reimagined every time the kettle boils and the night grows long. A final swirl of sensation, every song sung, every race run, every movie watched, every heart mended and broken, every fortune won and lost. I even glimpse the metro again, valiant as ever, trundling down an endless ribbon of road under a sky ablaze with possibility. And then the void lets go. The universe, having revealed itself not as a riddle to be solved, but as a friend to be cherished, opens a door. Light, warmth, the scent of home. Pig, already dreaming, twitches his whiskers and sighs in his sleep. We are through. Emerging from a singularity is not, as you might imagine, accompanied by a choir of angels or the triumphant crash of cosmic cymbals. There is no confetti, no rousing chorus, no trophy awarded for not losing your teacup or your cat. Though, in fairness, both Pig and the cup are accounted for, and I'd accept a ribbon if one were offered. No, what greets you instead is a quiet, unassuming clarity. The feeling you get after a long walk in misty woods, or the first sip of tea after an afternoon spent gardening. The world is not new, but your eyes are. We have landed, if indeed landed is the word, on a gently rolling plain of what appears to be light, or memory, or perhaps some combination of the two. For a moment everything is soft focus, colours and sounds flowing around us in ripples, the air alive with possibility. Pig stretches luxuriously, kneading his claws into my shoulder as if to remind the universe that he, at least, intends to remain the centre of all things. I find myself contemplating all we have seen, relativity's dance, the gallery of infinite knowledge, the peculiar hush of the singularity. It would be tempting at this point to wax philosophical, to announce that I have seen the machinery behind the curtain and glimpsed the logic of it all. But the truth, if I'm honest, is both grander and gentler than that. What the black hole offers is not a grand secret, but a shift of perspective, the privilege of seeing familiar things with new eyes. It's a bit like driving my old Geo Metro, never the fastest car in the village, but after a ride through the heart of a black hole, even that battered relic feels like a miracle of engineering. Suddenly, the slow trundle down Sussex lanes, the rattle of the glove box and the stubborn optimism of a car that shouldn't still run, all become tokens of the extraordinary. How marvellous to move at any speed at all, when you've seen time unspool and loop and fold in on itself like a badly made origami swan. Pig wanders a few paces away, investigating a patch of what may or may not be sunlit grass. He bats at a speck of dust that flares with all the colours of the spectrum, then promptly loses interest and flops onto his back, exposing his stomach to the cosmos in a gesture of supreme trust. I take his lead. I sit, cross-legged, and breathe in the scent of, well, everything. Fresh bread, old books, distant rain, the memory of favourite films and forgotten tunes. Perspective, I realise, is not the same as certainty. It is the ability to look at what you have and see it as enough, to find in the swirl of uncertainty the steady comfort of a warm mug, the humour in every mishap, and the grace in accepting both the vast and the trivial as equally precious. I recall a conversation with Christopher Hitchens at a party in Cambridge, a night thick with the scent of pipe smoke, and the arguments of people who cared deeply about being right. Hitchens, leaning in with that glint in his eye, remarked, "The only thing worth pursuing is the next question, not the last answer." At the time, I thought him evasive. Now, after all that spiralling and unspooling, I see he was simply wise. Perspective allows you to forgive yourself your foolishness, for chasing the ultimate answer, for believing the perfect cup of tea was just a blend away, for thinking Pig would ever willingly come when called. It allows you to let go of old disappointments. Yes, even that Wheel of Fortune moment where, if I'm honest, I fumbled the bonus round and lost a set of steak knives that would have seen more use than the Metro ever did. More importantly, it allows you to look at those moments with affection, to laugh, and to move on. Perspective, I suspect, is the real gift of the black hole. Not the knowledge, not the awe, but the gentle, forgiving clarity that comes from stepping outside your own story, then returning home a little less certain and a little more alive. Pig, having lost interest in philosophy, returns to my lap, purring with the soft, seismic rumble of contentment. The landscape shifts, resolving into something that feels remarkably like my study at home, filtered through a dream. The battered armchair, the cluttered desk, even the faint impression of Jupiter and Jupiter disappearing around a distant corner. Everything as it was, only now, somehow, more. It is tempting to bottle this feeling, to carry it back like a souvenir and show it off at dinner parties. Here, have some fresh perspective, hand-delivered from the far side of a black hole. But perspective, like tea, loses its flavour if hoarded. It must be brewed fresh each day, savoured in company, and shared with those who will appreciate its subtleties. The lesson, I think, is not to chase after revelations, but to notice the everyday miracles, the laughter of friends, the absurdity of the cosmos, the silent wisdom of a cat in a patch of sun. I stand, Pig balanced on my shoulder like an improbable parrot, and stretch. The world is waiting, unchanged and yet entirely new. I gather myself, dust off my trousers, and with a final glance at the plane of light, now receding as all revelations must, I step forward. Pig, in his infinite wisdom, closes his eyes and begins to dream. If anyone asks, I will say the trip was worth it, not for the knowledge gained, but for the vision returned, and if they press for details, I'll simply smile, shrug, and offer them a cup of tea. After all, what else is there? End of part 11. Would you like to move on to part 12, The Return, Escaping the Black Hole? You said, yes, please write part 12 as described and aim for 1,000 words. ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here is part 12, The Return, Escaping the Black Hole, in full tea and gravity style. Professor Teabottom and Pig's improbable return is equal parts scientific whimsy, gentle humour, and a celebration of homecoming with cosmic metaphors, a bit of luck, and a nod to the humble power of everyday joys. There is a theory, advanced by only the most imaginative physicists and one particularly eccentric Sussex cat, that escape from a black hole is possible, not by brute force, nor by clever mathematics, but by an act of cosmic hospitality. The universe, it is said, cannot resist a good story, and every story, even the most labyrinthine, wants to find its way home. Pig and I, still perched on the luminous plane of post-singularity clarity, find ourselves contemplating the prospect of return. The path out is not obvious. There are no signposts, no arrows labelled this way up, and certainly no kindly cosmic attendant offering tea and directions. The air, if it can be called air, is thick with possibility, like the hush in a theatre just before the lights dim. Pig, never one to be cowed by the ineffable, stretches, yawns, and gives me a look that clearly says, "Well, aren't you supposed to be the professor?" He's right, of course. I am supposed to know these things. I am, after all, a man who once won a Geo Metro on Wheel of Fortune, and who managed to drive it from Land's End to John O'Groats without ever losing the radio signal. Surely I can navigate our way out of a mere cosmic paradox. I consider the scientific options. There is the classic approach. Look for an outflow of Hawking radiation, a trickle of quantum information escaping the black hole's clutches, as Stephen Hawking once described in a pub, between sips of flat ale and the retelling of increasingly improbable anecdotes. But the landscape offers no obvious exit, only shifting waves of light and memory, folding and unfolding like the world's most complicated origami. There is also the quantum loophole favoured by Alan Parsons, who I am convinced could coax a melody out of any paradox given time and a Moog synthesizer. In theory, we could simply tunnel out, relying on the universe's fondness for improbable escapes and musical interludes. It sounds delightfully messy, just the sort of thing Pig would approve of. But as we sit quietly considering our options, it occurs to me that perhaps the way home is not to be found by searching, but by wanting to return. Stories, after all, are stubborn things. They bend, they twist, but in the end they yearn for the familiar. The adventure is never quite real until it can be retold, preferably over tea, with Pig in attendance and Jupiter lurking just out of sight. So I do what any self-respecting professor would do. I close my eyes, clutch Pig to my chest, and think of home. Not as a place, but as a feeling. The battered armchair, the scatter of books, the last echo of supersonic on the radio, the lingering aroma of Event Horizon tea curling through the study. I think of the kitchen clock, which runs 10 minutes fast, and the neighbour's roses, always reaching over the fence with friendly impudence. I think of the creak of the stairs at midnight, the comforting weight of Pig on my lap, the invisible presence of Jupiter, whose mischief sustains the household's peculiar equilibrium. At first, nothing happens. Pig purrs, a low, contented sound that rumbles in my arms and seems to vibrate in the very bones of whatever this reality has become. The light grows warmer, softens around the edges, and a breeze, impossibly gloriously familiar, stirs the air. It smells of rain on paving stones, of fresh-cut grass, of toast and marmalade, and the faintest trace of motor oil. And then, quite suddenly, the world stirs. The plane of light dissolves into the glow of a single lamp. The cosmic hush gives way to the gentle tick of the study clock, and I am home. The battered armchair is beneath me, Pig on my lap, eyes squeezed shut in the luxurious bliss of homecoming. The old desk is littered with notes, the remains of tea, and inexplicably a geometric key fob whose existence I had almost, but not quite, forgotten. For a long moment I simply sit, letting the sensation of return sink in. Everything is as it was, and yet everything is changed. The air is ordinary, the dust motes float in the golden light, and Jupiter, sensing that order has been restored, race through the hall, setting off a chain reaction of overturned vases and cheerful chaos. I rise, a little stiff from our travels, and stretch. Pig leaps to the floor, tail high, and pads over to the window to survey his domain. The garden glows in the first light of dawn, every leaf edged with dew, every shadow soft and forgiving. The universe, having briefly revealed its secrets, now sits quietly, waiting to see what I will make of it. There is a knock at the door, a sound so blessedly mundane that it nearly brings tears to my eyes. I open it to find the postman, slightly bedraggled, holding a parcel addressed in my own handwriting, dated from a week in the future. I accept it without comment. After all, what is one more paradox among friends? Inside, the kettle whistles, and I set about making a fresh pot of tea. Pig jumps onto his cushion, Jupiter vanish behind the curtains, and the study is filled with the comforting sound of normality. I pour the tea, breathe in its earthy aroma, and sit back to savour the moment. As I sip, I glance at the Metra key fob on the table and chuckle. Life, I think, is much like that improbable car. Surprising, occasionally ridiculous, but always ready to take you somewhere unexpected, provided you're willing to enjoy the ride. Pig purrs, the clock ticks, and the day begins anew. The universe, in its infinite generosity, has given me the one gift I value above all others, the chance to return, to tell the tale, and to cherish the miracle of the ordinary. And that, dear listeners, is how you escape a black hole, not with equations or engines, but with hope, memory, and the unwavering belief that home, in all its tea-scented glory, is always waiting, just beyond the edge of the unknown. Homecoming, I have found, is rarely the grand affair one might expect. There is no brass band, no parade of grateful townsfolk, and certainly no commemorative plaque to mark your improbable return from the depths of a black hole. No, homecoming arrives quietly, on a cushion of dust motes swirling in golden sunlight, on the creak of a familiar floorboard, in the welcome heaviness of an armchair that remembers your shape. Pig, having resumed his position of domestic authority, immediately surveys the study for any hint of disruption. Satisfied that his sunbeam is unoccupied and the tea tray is once again on the correct table, he leaps onto his tartan cushion with a dignity that suggests the entire universe has simply been waiting for his return. I can't help but smile. If cats possess a sense of time, it is certainly not the same one Einstein struggled to define. Pig is always precisely where he needs to be, yesterday, today, and forever, all at once. I take a moment to breathe in the gentle chaos of my study. Here are the detritus and treasures of a life, a half-finished crossword, a mug with 3 competing tea stains, the battered geometric key fob glinting on the bookshelf. I even spot a DVD copy of Miami Connection, tucked behind a stack of old physics journals, its neon lettering promising karate, rock music, and the sort of joyous improbability that now feels not unlike my own adventure. With the return to the ordinary comes a strange kind of reverence. How miraculous it is to simply exist within these walls, to hear the wind teasing the garden roses, to watch the sunlight pool across the battered rug, to sense Jupiter, those ever elusive companions, stirring up trouble in the attic. The extraordinary, it turns out, only sharpens the pleasure of the mundane. I put the kettle on, a ritual as sacred as any cosmic mystery. The water boils, the tea leaves swirl, and for a moment I am struck by how each step in the process carries the memory of every cup I have ever made. Each one a small act of hope, a promise that there will be time to enjoy it, and perhaps, if fortune is kind, someone with whom to share it. Pig, with a soft chirp, demands a saucer of milk. I oblige, smiling as he laps it with a concentration that would put most astrophysicists to shame. The house settles into its rhythms, creaks, clicks, and the distant clatter of Jupiter and Jupiter orchestrating their latest mischief. As I sip my tea, the enormity of the journey finally lands, not as a thunderclap but as a gentle rain. I have seen the inside of a black hole, met old friends and memories in impossible places, refused the temptation of infinite knowledge, and come back changed but, miraculously, unbroken. I have learned that the universe is vaster and stranger than any textbook can capture, but also that its greatest miracles often arrive on quiet feet and purring paws. The mail arrives. Among the usual stack of circulars and bills there is a postcard, postmarked from Princeton but bearing no return address. The handwriting is suspiciously familiar, playful, looping, a little reckless. You'll never guess what's just beyond the horizon. All my best, G. P.S. The left pedal still sticks. I laugh aloud, imagining Cousin George somewhere in the afterlife, still navigating the uncharted roads of both physics and old geometros. The afternoon drifts by. I tidy the desk, feed Pig, refill the biscuit tin, and take stock of the peculiar comfort that comes from small tasks done well. It is tempting to seek the grand revelation, to tell the world of all I have witnessed. But in truth, the story is not the revelation. The story is the return. The miracle is not that we find answers, but that we can sit, after all of it, with a cup of tea in hand and the same old cat snoring on the same old cushion. There are, no doubt, more adventures waiting, questions unanswered, universes unexplored, tea blends untasted. But for now, I am content. The black hole has given me perspective, not certainty, gratitude, not conquest. The greatest journey is always the one that brings you back to yourself. As evening falls, I close the curtains, light a lamp, and jot a few notes in my battered journal. Pig, belly up and dreaming, purrs softly in time with the ticking clock. Somewhere, Jupiter and Jupiter conspire to keep life interesting. And I, Professor Teabottom, home again, raise my cup to the window, salute the quiet stars, and whisper, "Thank you for the questions, for the answers, and most of all, for the way back." Night has fallen in Sussex, and the cottage is awash in a golden hush. There is a particular quality to English darkness, velvety, unhurried, soft around the edges, like a well-worn blanket pulled gently over the shoulders of the world. The lamp glows, the kettle cools, and Pig is curled so deeply into his tartan cushion that he appears to have become one with the fabric. If Jupiter and Jupiter are plotting any further escapades, they are being commendably stealthy about it. I settle into my armchair, a fresh pot of tea within easy reach, and take up my battered old journal. The ritual of recounting an adventure is, in many ways, as important as the adventure itself. There's a comfort in translating the ineffable into words, in turning the wild, surreal edges of memory into sentences that might, with luck, hold together like the pages of a well-loved book. The act of sharing a story is not, I have decided, about proving the extraordinary. It is about opening a window, however briefly, between one person and another. To sit in the quiet with a cat and a cup and the memory of the universe's wildest paradoxes swirling behind your eyes, and to say, "Let me tell you what happened to me, and perhaps you'll find something of yourself in the telling." I begin, as always, at the beginning, with the first odd spiral in the teacup, the feeling of the world gently shifting, the sense that something marvellous, or disastrous, was about to unfold. The words come slowly at first, then in a flood. Pig's steady presence, the twist of the study into a cosmic gateway, the riotous dance of memory and physics as we tumbled through the black hole's heart. I write about Richard Feynman's laughter echoing in impossible places, Alan Parsons fine-tuning the background noise of reality, Bowie's quiet salute, and the ever-steady Jimmy Clark taking each turn with effortless grace. I describe the gallery of infinite knowledge, the temptation to know all and the quiet relief of refusing. I note the warmth of Pig's purr as the only constant in a universe determined to reinvent itself at every opportunity. And yes, I make mention, just in passing, of my own oddities. The Geo Metro, so improbable a prize, now a totem of humility and luck. The improbable victories, the celebrated mishaps, the lessons learned by doing precisely the wrong thing at exactly the right time. I am careful as I write to keep my tone honest but light. There is a danger in retelling adventure, the risk of slipping into self-importance, of making yourself the hero when you are at best the bemused observer. If there is any wisdom to be found, it belongs as much to Pig, to Jupiter and Jupiter, to cousins and friends and the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock, as it does to me. There is a certain magic in the sharing itself. I can feel the weight of the journey lifting, replaced by a gentle buoyancy. The pleasure of having returned, the even greater pleasure of having someone, even if only the blank page, to tell it to. The house, the garden, the distant stars all feel brighter for being included. I remember then a conversation many years ago in the Abbey Road canteen. I was pouring the third cup of tea of a sleepless night, trying to untangle a knotty bit of tape from a mixing desk, when Hitchens wandered in, trailing cigarette smoke and irony in equal measure. "The only thing worth telling," he said, "is the truth. But don't let that stop you from telling a good story along the way." At the time, I thought him half mad. Now I see he was only half wrong. For what is a journey, across time, through space, into the unknown, if not a collection of small truths bound together by the thread of narrative? Every grand revelation shrinks in the retelling, becomes humble, human. Just another night by the fire. Every simple detail, a cat's yawn, a chipped mug, a song half remembered, expands, takes on new weight, glimmers with the importance of being cherished. Pig stirs, stretches, and sensing that words are being shared in his presence, performs a slow, deliberate roll that ends with all four paws in the air and a faint, victorious snore. I pause to record the moment. It seems as significant as anything the black hole had to offer. Outside, a fox barks in the dark. The roses tap the window, and the familiar Sussex wind threads its way through the cracks. I write on, unhurried, letting the story unspool as it wishes. I do not force an ending. After all, stories, like journeys, rarely finish neatly. There is always a return, and always another beginning just waiting behind the next page. At last the words slow. The tea is nearly gone. Pig's breathing is deep and even, and the house is wrapped in a contentment I would not trade for any cosmic revelation. I close the journal, place it gently on the table, and lean back with a sigh that is half exhaustion, half gratitude. Sharing the story, I realise, has not diminished it. If anything, it has brought it home. The adventure is not lessened for being told. It is made real. The study is just a study, the night just a night. But within these quiet boundaries the universe has visited and left a trace. I raise my cup to the dark, to Pig, to whoever might someday read these words and find, for a moment, the courage to ask their own questions, to chase their own spirals, to trust that every adventure, great or small, is worth the telling. And with that, Pig and I, faithful companions at the end of the world and back, drift off to sleep beneath the gentle gaze of 1,000 undemanding stars. End of part 14. Ready for part 15? The lesson of the spiral? You said, how many parts are left? ChatGPT said, you're writing a 15-part episode, per your outline request. You've just completed part 14, sharing the story, so there is one part left. Part 15, the lesson of the spiral. This final part typically offers the closing reflection or lesson, drawn from the entire journey. Professor Teabottom's gentle epilogue tying the cosmic adventure back to daily life, often ending with Pig asleep in the study, the Professor's signature warmth, and a quietly philosophical note for bedtime. Would you like to proceed with part 15? You said, yes, please write part 15, aiming for 1,000 words and include the lyrics from Supersonic. You can have it all. But how much do you want it? ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here is part 15, the lesson of the spiral, the gentle, reflective, close to the journey. Professor Teabottom wraps up with a quietly philosophical epilogue, weaves in the lyrics from Supersonic, and as always settles Pig for a peaceful night. Expect warmth, wisdom, a touch of humour, and a strong sense of homecoming and perspective. The lesson of the spiral. It is a curious truth that the greatest journeys end much as they began, in stillness, with a cup of tea cooling on the windowsill, and the steady sound of a cat's purr for company. My adventure through the heart of a black hole, through spirals and singularities, riddles and revelations, has returned me, full circle, to the battered comfort of my Sussex study. Outside, the last embers of twilight melt into night. Inside, the lamp glows softly, casting the sort of golden halo that would flatter even the humblest home. Pig is asleep now, his head tucked under one paw, tail curled with perfect symmetry, a contented monument to the enduring power of naps. Jupiter and Jupiter, those two quantum enigmas, have not materialized this evening, though there are enough muffled thumps from the attic to assure me of their spectral presence. The day is ending as so many do, with gentle routine, quiet gratitude, and a faint half-remembered melody drifting through the corners of my mind. It's always at this time, when the world grows quiet and the weight of the day settles, that the lesson, if there is one, begins to take shape, not as a grand proclamation, but as a whisper, woven through the fabric of ordinary things. I glance at the battered Geometro key fob on the desk, the faded cover of Miami Connection, the notebook of scribbled physics and half-baked recipes. I recall every odd thread of this journey. Pig floating bravely through gravity's wildest loop, old friends materializing at the edge of reason, the temptation of infinite knowledge, and the peaceful, almost miraculous act of returning home. For all the questions that remain, I find myself circling back to the simplest, most human of truths, that life is richest not in the answers we gather, but in the questions we are willing to carry. And it's here, as I refill my cup and nudge Pig gently to make room, that a familiar refrain surfaces. Not a line from any physics lecture, nor a pearl plucked from Feynman's wit or Hitchin's barbed tongue, but a lyric from my favourite band, those ragged philosophers of Manchester. You can have it all, but how much do you want it? There it is, the whole lesson of the spiral, the question the universe asks each time we peer into the unknown. It's easy to be dazzled by the prospect of having it all, the knowledge, the adventure, the certainty that you have wrung every secret from the world. But the wiser part of me knows, thanks in no small part to Pig and 1,000 unsolved mysteries, that happiness lies not in possessing everything, but in savouring what you choose, in holding lightly the things that matter and letting the rest go. The spiral, I think, is less a path to conquest and more a dance, a gentle turning toward the heart of things, then back out again, each circuit leaving you changed but still, wonderfully, yourself. There will always be another adventure, another question, another night when the tea tastes of starlight and the air hums with possibility. But for tonight, I am content to sit in the spiral's centre, to share my story, and to let the mysteries be. Pig stirs in his sleep, stretches, and gives a brief, blissful sigh. The house settles around us, each familiar object taking its place in the quiet. I sip my tea and let the warmth fill me, grateful for everything and everyone that brought me here. From the quantum quirks of Jupiter and Jupiter, to the wisdom of Bowie, Parsons, Clark, Feynman, Hitchens, and even Dragon Sound's improbable courage. I am grateful too for the metro that always started, eventually, for the small victories and gentler defeats, for the long nights and even longer questions. The spiral is not a straight line, nor is it a maze without exit. It is instead a shape that lets you visit the heart of things, and then, just as gently, find your way home. It is the path of those who are willing to keep wondering, to keep turning, to keep asking, how much do you want it? Not as a challenge, but as an invitation. I close my notebook, set aside my cup, and watch the moon rise over the garden. The night is full of old stories and new beginnings, and somewhere, just out of sight, adventure is already curling in the shadows waiting for its cue. So I leave you, dear listener, with this. Cherish your questions, dance with your spirals, choose what you love and hold it lightly. And remember, as the last note fades and the story winds to its close, you can have it all, but how much do you want it? Good night, and may your own spirals bring you safely home. And as always, mind the damp, bring a biscuit, and never ever try to outstare a puffin. And so, dear listener, as the last of the teacups cools and Pig begins to snore most contentedly on the windowsill, we come to the end of tonight's tale. If you've enjoyed this little ramble through the improbable and the quietly profound, do be a dear and like the episode and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the tea flowing, the lights low, and the cats, both remembered and yet to be, well fed and purring. And don't forget, you're warmly invited to join our free Substack. It's where you'll hear about each new episode as it arrives, and where our growing circle of sleepy science enthusiasts gathers to swap thoughts, dream up topics, and gently bicker about whether Pluto should bring a casserole to the next planetary reunion. Now, one last thing. Tonight's story has been for entertainment purposes only. It is not, strictly speaking, fact, nor is it entirely fiction. Rather, it exists in that peculiar quantum superposition of the two until observed, preferably over a cup of something warm. Sleep well, and until next time, may your teacup never be empty.